unpacking today's headlines. This is Souls and Liberty in Depth.
Hello everyone and welcome to In Depth, a production of Souls and Liberty brought to you in partnership with MyPillow.
The courageous veterans here today bear witness to how socialism, radical mobs, and violent communists ruin a nation. Now the Democrat Party is unleashing socialism right within our own beautiful country. Today we proclaim that America will never be a socialist or communist country, and I'm going to add that word, or communist.
All right, more on that later, but first,
there's a part of what we must do that is action-based. And when we each individually take our steps on the things that God has called us to do, that's when you get the collective change.
All right, finally, we have arrived at the home stretch. 1 week to go, and we are beyond thrilled to report the empire of lies is crumbling and in a state of near total disarray. Joining us today is fellow Souls and Liberty contributor Arthur Clareau. Art, they're running out of Xanax over at DNC and Kamala headquarters, and the mass depression is spreading. It's obvious. Every single article that you read, watching all of the talking heads on the left, on all of their Marxist media. Let's show the audience this remarkable, because there's no other way to put it, opinion piece from none other than Jeff Bezos admitting no one trusts the mainstream media anymore. It came out earlier today. Here it is. Look at that headline. The hard truth. Americans don't trust the news media. A note from our owner. Art, that is beyond shocking that that man with that publication would admit that truth.
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge step forward. And we're seeing many of these steps, and have seen for the most of the last year, actually, I think. A lot of people have made this sort of change of heart. Mark Zuckerberg, now Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk finally came out and admitted what we kind of knew all along, or for a while. But to his point, why would anybody believe what the media is writing right now? Why would they? I completely agree with what he's saying. They have lost that trust, and it's been decades in the making. This is not something that happened overnight. People used to trust it a lot more than they do, but for me, the kind of turning point was in 2014 when I was doing some research on the, at the time, civil war in Syria, and I found that the media's representation, including their sources, were not like it was nothing close to what was actually happening on the ground. Right. I mean, then you got Trump in 2016, you've got COVID, and mostly peaceful but fiery summer of love. all these sorts of things, they don't help. People can see their shops burning down the street, and you're telling them this is peaceful. What are they going to believe? Of course, they're going to believe their own eyes over you.
Yeah, I mean, this is a paradigm shift. I don't know that people. I mean, certainly some people are, and we're telling people about it here, but we are sitting in probably the most historic reshaping of the American body politic, and by extension, sort of the culture around it, than I think we have probably ever undergone. It's in part owing to social media, large part owing to social media, even though it is still kind of a wild, wild west out there. As we said earlier, their empire of lies is beginning to collapse on them. Yeah.
Well, I think Bezos put it really well. He has one line in there about reality, and this is something I've said many times as well. You can pretend all you want, you can ignore reality all you want, but eventually reality slaps you in the face. And Bezos' line was, reality is the undefeated champion.
Yeah.
That's just the case.
That line is the admission, even though he doesn't say it that way, that line is the admission that they have been lying and gaslighting people. It's interesting, we were talking before the show about this, that he admits, we suck, and people don't trust us. He doesn't go to the next step, which is, well, why don't they trust you? Because you're lying, and you have an agenda, and all of that stuff. Look, I'm perfectly fine. We've got an agenda here, but we admit it. Nobody comes to us and goes, I wonder if they're the objective. No, we correspond ourselves to natural law and church teaching and all of that, and here we are. He's got the first step. People don't trust us. Now the question is why? Well, let's hope he comes to the reality of that pretty darn soon. All right, when we come back, Trump and Christians. Trump and Catholics. Lots to talk about there. Be right back. The establishment has tried to assassinate President Trump twice, but we can't really be shocked that those who slaughter 1 million unborn babies each year would try to kill one more human being who stands in the way of their diabolical agenda. Trump, like every one of us, including all of us at Souls and Liberty, is a sinner. But like all of us, he is in the fight and fighting for all of us to get one more chance, maybe a last chance to save the republic. We must hang together, or as Benjamin Franklin said, we shall hang separately. And maybe far sooner than many imagine, because communists take over and always persecute Christians and Catholics in particular. Let us help you fight these forces of evil. Become a monthly supporter today so we can continue giving you the information, the tools of our faith, and the support network you need to go out and save souls and save our nation. Join our merry band of happy warriors and click below to get into the fight. We need you, we need each other. Join the resistance. Become a monthly donor today. All right, Art, yesterday at the Faith Summit in Georgia, Trump said, quote, "They are trying to hurt you. They are trying to stymie you. How could a Catholic possibly vote for Kamala?" And right now, Rasmussen polling shows that Trump's got probably a 3 or 4 point lead, not quite a majority. There's probably some, whatever, but he's at like 48, 49. Kamala's at like 45, 46. So it's a 3 or 4 point lead among Catholics. That isn't going away. There's nothing changing as we move forward here now in the remaining week. There's no dynamic change. There's nothing. So for Kamala to, chase the Christ is King people out of her rally, for her not show up to the Al Smith dinner, for her to continue to push that Catholic hospitals must be forced to do abortions against their religious principles, our religious principles. Trump's right. He says to Christians and Catholics specifically, she sucks, she's bad for you, she's going to persecute you. Can you believe the conversations that we're having in a political campaign? I've never heard this kind of spotlight on Catholicism specifically like this campaign.
Yeah. I wonder how much that has to do with some of the great work that a lot of Catholics have been doing. Including you, Gary, including so much of the team that works here. I don't mean to be self-aggrandizing. There's many others as well. But let's be real. But then also J.D. Vance, who's a Catholic, and there's many others who are Catholics who are starting to step up and starting to really realize that you can't just play this, how would I put it, neutral game and pretend that this doesn't matter as the world changes around you. You have to, if you're not defending your castle, someone else is taking it over.
Yep.
Look, let's be real. Trump is right. If you're a Catholic, if you're a Christian, if you're in any way conservative, if you're a patriot, if you love your country, any of these things, how can you really vote for the other side? There have been times in history, sure, where there might have been more of a toss up where it's like, it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. But this isn't that.
Yeah.
If you look at Trump's side, you've got anti-war, you've got healthy food. Come on, healthy food. You've got being against cancer-causing chemicals, bringing jobs back, closing the border, getting rid of violent gangs and criminals. Like, these should be very basic things. This shouldn't even be part of the discussion.
Yeah.
But they are. This is the differentiator.
That is spot on. That we're having the discussion about these things is, it's phenomenal. But what you like about it is the discussion is being had. Every now and then, I think it's good for everybody, individuals, families, countries, whatever, cultures, to sort of go back and have like a bit of a reset and say, why do we believe these things? Why are we this? In a marriage, what is it I love about her or him? Am I treating my children in the best way that I can? We all get into these habits, cultural habits and the whole bit. It's good to be doing in 12-step programs, they call it doing an inventory. You go and you do an inventory on yourself. And it seems like these discussions have that aspect or that dynamic to them. Why do we want a closed border? Why do we want people to be able to have jobs? The answers to these are somewhat obvious, but the media has been able to spin them away and say, we'll send your jobs overseas. We'll open up the borders and let everybody else in here. The pile-on from the media that if you oppose these things, you're bad and you're evil and there's something wrong with you and you're a racist and a sexist and a misogynist and whatever. Trump has stepped into the breach and called BS on all of it. I've never seen anything like this ever. In all the 40 plus years I've been covering this. Plus, I'm like you, big fan of history. Never, ever, ever have seen anything like what's unfolding right before our eyes right now.
Yeah, it's spectacular. And to your point earlier, there's a concept that Burke and many conservatives have put forward several times, and it's the idea that with each generation that comes up, they have to test the structure that's been built before them.
Yeah.
And that's what every generation does. That's why there's the questions, right? The questions that you were just mentioning. But the responsibility of the adults of the society is to explain those things. And then the testing burns away the waste. It burns away the stuff that's superfluous, that doesn't need to be there. And what is good is explained, and then the next generation picks it up and carries it forward to the generation following.
Right.
That got totally screwed up in the West over the last 50, 60, 70 years, got completely screwed up. And we have at least, I would say, 3 generations who can't answer those questions or have not until now been able to answer those questions. And I think that's why it was necessary to come to this point where we're asking these very basic things. It's like anyone searching for their faith in Christ and God. You have to start at the beginning. Can I believe there's a God? Yeah. Is there a reason for me to believe that? And then you build from there.
Sure. Yeah, that's a very good insight. It's a very good insight. It's, why do we need a healthy family life in America? Well, in any country, but we're talking about America. Why do we need, children being raised by a mother and a father? Why all of these kinds of, they're so basic, these questions, but you're right. For the past, 60, 70, whatever it is years, there has been a communist infiltration into that generational transfer. They've injected themselves sort of at each point along the way so that now they've kind of corrupted so many minds, young minds, on the educational level and the media level in particular, that we reached a point of perhaps civilizational collapse. And all of a sudden here in the last week, it really looks like the good guys have come back, taken the lead, and have the ball, and the clock is running out on the bad guys. Listen, when we come back, the individual campaigns know how all of this is playing out. Communists are on the run, and the most incredible political comeback, perhaps in history, is unfolding before our eyes. Get your comments, Art, right after this.
Go to MyPillow.com or call the number on the screen. Use your promo code to take advantage of wholesale pricing for the first time ever on TV, including my standard size MyPillow, only $14.88. They've never been offered this low before. We have limited quantities at this price, so limit's going to be 10, and once they're gone, they're gone.
No matter who wins in November, we have to embrace that we are living in a post-Christendom culture. And the heart of that is a rejection of the gospel. As one item on our agenda to combat this, Souls and Liberty is hosting our first annual retreat at sea. You might be familiar with the annual event we produced for over 10 years at Church Militant. Dr. Jules Gomez, our Rome correspondent, and I are going to be doing the presenting, and the theme is Christians in Exile Triumphing in Adversity, which provides a whole range of discussions to think about. Now, we sail out of Galveston, Texas to the Western Caribbean November 10th to the 17th, yes, right after the election. I think all of us are probably going to need it one way or the other. Please join us for serious discussion, spiritual preparation, and bonding, very important, bonding with fellow Catholics. Registration information is provided below and on our site at soulsandliberty.com/retreat-at-sea 2024. So sign up and we hope to see you there. All right, I want to repeat that again. The individual campaigns know how this is playing out. They're losing and they're gonna lose. Question is, how badly are they gonna lose? And the most incredible personal political comeback, and I think you could safely say in human history, is unfolding right now before our eyes. Your thoughts on all of this? It's truly, I mean, you can't find a word for it. There's no describer for it.
It's really just like you described earlier. And to use a different metaphor, it's like you're careening toward a cliff and all of a sudden the brakes start to be applied and you're like, oh, thank God. Thank God we might not go over the edge. We just might survive this. I can't think of a better way to express the feeling around that. Of course, it's not over until it's over. And knowing the deep state and the way they work and the way their deep pockets and their deep machinations, we got to keep praying and we got to keep on top of things. That
voting.
Being said, it is a really, really, really good feeling. And I think it goes back to a little bit to what we were talking about at the beginning too, with Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk and people like that. Look, historically, as much as we like to believe that, individuals change the world, there's some truth to that, I guess, but in reality, elites change the world generally. They're the ones with the time, they're the ones with the knowledge, they're the ones with the finances. And of course, there has to be a nice synergy between the desires of the of the general population and the elites to get that moving. But it's generally led by elites. And I think that's what we're seeing now. We're seeing an elite shift, which we didn't have in 2016, an elite shift over to the Trump campaign. That brings with it its challenges, of course, because elites also have their own desires and their own aims. But at the very least, like I said at the very beginning, if it's a brake on the car that was careening toward the cliff, let's get us to a stop. Let's get us to safety, and we can figure out the rest later. So I think it's a really wonderful thing, and I cannot wait for that moment to come where it's just finalized, solidified.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really, really good insight that there's a shift from the elites to the new elites. At the moment, that is, obviously, I mean, Trump is the poster boy for that, no duh. But it's interesting watching that shift happen. It is happening before our eyes. The four giant tech and media guys went to Trump. They have all spoken with him in the last week, kind of hat in hand. They're probably, covering their you-know-whats, but, they did that. That the markets have responded. Wall Street, the investment bankers, everybody is already baking in a Trump win. There isn't a single data point that the commies have to sort of hang their hat on. It's Obama and his desperation. You can look at the former elites, and even Klaus Schwab said before he got sick, if Trump wins, globalism will have the brakes applied to it. Yeah, that's the point. But talk a little bit more, because I really like that. That's a really good insight that there's a shift there's no such thing as a world without elites. It doesn't exist. There's people who are talented and have money and blah, 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 and smarter and all that stuff, just their natural talent. Somebody's going to rise to the top. But to point out that, well, here was the old group of elites, and they're being shoved off the stage by this group of elites. How did that happen? Because it is happening.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely it is. I mean, you can look at some of the stuff that's developing where you guys are down there in Texas. There's an entire central hub being built there, that is going to be, I think, crucial for this. But there's so much more. There's so many more indicators of this shift. Like you said, the big tech companies coming hat in hand. Even in Europe, there's now a shift amongst the center left there that wants to retain power, wants to retain control, towards more policies that would align better with a Trump world, let's just say. And I think it's twofold. Part of this was necessity. I think at some point the elites thought that they could actually get this globalist world in place. The older elites get the globalist world in place, and that they would always remain on top. They didn't realize that maybe the elites in China, the elites in India, and the elites in Russia would also like to have a seat at that table. And I don't think they really liked the idea that when those guys pulled up a chair and started making their own demands. So there's been this kind of shift, obviously, into a multipolar world. I think almost everyone in international relations now discusses that. And I think that created a sort of external pressure that you need a shift. You can't keep playing in make-believe land. You need to actually shift back into reality because now there's actual threat. But then at the same time, I think also there's something to the natural order of things, something to the way that God arranged the world, that he doesn't allow it to ever really swing drastically to a destructive side. I think that there's something within us. Maybe it's just God's own, he reaches down and rescues us when we can't help ourselves or we're destroying ourselves. But whatever it is, there's something about, if you look at history, there's always a shift back to some form of balance. And I think that that's quite a fantastic thing, but also something really interesting to dig into more deeply.
Yeah, there is a protective divine providence that, evil can only go so far. God is king, much to the chagrin of Jesus is king, much to the chagrin of Kamala Harris and her rally attendees. He will only allow evil to go so far. Now, obviously that's been allowed to go far, but there are limits to it because God sets the limits. And, he's in control. It's his world. He's on his throne. Nothing is taking him off that throne. He is king. Jesus Christ is king. And, there ain't nothing changing that. They can rage and whine and, what's the line from the book of Revelation? The nations raged in anger and God's on his throne laughing. We're watching that unfold right now in some kind of murky, not exactly clear sort of way, but the sense of it is incredible. It really is. Arthur, give us a closing thought. I mean, I got to tell you, you're much smarter than you look.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. Look, I think one last point to add to what you said, because I think that's exactly it. One last point to that is that God uses people throughout the Bible. That's what you see. God uses people, and it takes the people actually accepting that challenge. I mean, some of us do the Jonah thing. We go off and we just try to forget it or run away, right? It takes you accepting what God has given you and stepping up and doing the things that must be done to make that shift. And that could be part of the reason why things go so far sometimes before they turn back, because God has people that he's called to do things, and for whatever reason, they aren't fulfilling that mission. So this is an interesting side of it too. It's not just, hey, let's sit back and wait for God to do everything for us. We're going to sit over here and we're going to, let him do his thing. There's a part of what we must do that is action based, and when we each individually take our steps on the things that God has called us to do, that's when you get the collective change.
Yeah, no, very well said. Very well said. All right, Arthur, thanks for the moment. We'll have you back on, obviously, as we swim through all of this. Coming to us from Toronto, Arthur Clareau. Thank you very much, man. God bless. All right, Donald Trump is going to win. perhaps even resoundingly, and thus complete the most astonishing, breathtaking comeback in political history, maybe in world history. Since he came down that escalator nearly 10 years ago, he has been lied about, spied on by Obama and his White House, maligned, undermined, betrayed, indicted, impeached, investigated, raided, convicted, shot, and savaged in print and broadcast by hundreds of media elites and tens, perhaps hundreds of millions of words printed and spoken. And yet, he now stands on the precipice in just 1 week of putting the finishing touches on a complete and total overhaul of the nation, the political system, and the media. The repercussions of what is happening will be felt for decades to come. In short, normal Americans, flawed as we are, have had it with the lies, and frankly, who could blame us? Normal people have been vilified, mocked, attacked, arrested, imprisoned, threatened with much more by a lying elite bent on world power built on our bones. That elite hates children, both in the womb and outside the womb. It is a pedophile, child-murdering, sex-trafficking, disgusting group of human scumbags never before witnessed in human history. To be certain, a Trump victory is not the end, it is just the beginning. Trials should begin on January 20th for treason, and if found guilty, the prescribed punishment for domestic enemies, yes, the enemy within, should be carried out. These people have destroyed lives by the hundreds of millions, from COVID to black genocide through abortion, as well as other races, to wiping out livelihoods of millions and millions of families, allowing drugs to pour into the country, destroying millions of people, allowing sex trafficking of hundreds of thousands, likely many more. Their list of crimes against humanity is terror-striking. They must be held to account, not just by being voted out of office. And that means they should no longer be allowed to walk among decent people any longer. Justice demands there be accountability and consequences for this evil, the terror that they have inflicted on so many. The world will be a much better place without murderers sitting in seats of power, an elitist cabal that hates you. This whole election has never really been about the price of gas or how much the cost of eggs has risen. It's been about justice. Justice will begin dawning in just about a week. God love you. I'm Gary Michael Voris.